Hello, everybody. Once again, welcome to another installment of A Rebel Without Applause, coming to you from the very comfortable confines of my television studio apartment right here in the Wood of the Holly. But the other half is coming to you from a not so comfortable confine. By that, I mean I'm with Hugh Bohane, and he is speaking to me from, of all places, the hottest spot on earth. And I'm not talking about a disco, I'm talking about the Ukraine. He's with me right now, and it's a privilege to have him. It's his second time on A Rebel Without Applause. He kindly joined me at the onset of another calamity called COVID from perhaps the safest location at that time, which was Da Nang in Vietnam. But now you're in the Ukraine. Hugh Bohane, thanks and welcome for joining me from so far away and under such difficult circumstances.
Thanks for having me, Bill. It's great to see you again.
How are you right now?
I'd be lying if I said I wasn't stressed. It's a bit of panic and chaos out there at the moment, and there's just so much information and misinformation, and the well is full, and it's just sort of picking through and finding out what's accurate, what's really happening, and yeah, it's been a stressful time. I can't deny that. I've been here on the ground for a month nearly, and it's just really escalated in the last few days.
And where are you right now? You're in the Ukraine, but it's a big place. So can you share with me where you are?
Yeah, so I'm in Kyiv. Okay. I'm in a hotel in Kyiv. So I arrived here a couple of days ago. I was down in the east in a place called Mariupol. So that's a sort of frontline city. It's a sort of industrial city, and I was filming down there. I've been on a job for the ABC, RABC, Australian Broadcast Corporation, and it was a cameraman role. And so I was just filming hours and hours of footage and just feeding it back to them in Australia and in London. And so I started in Kyiv. I had a week in Kyiv and filmed a protest and fashion week of all things. And then basically just went down southeast to Mariupol on the train. And so Mariupol's a frontline city. It got shelled just before I was leaving, and then again today. So yeah, I had to get on a train and book and come back up here.
Now, Mariupol, that's not on the Black Sea, that's on the Russian border, is that correct?
Yeah, it's close to the Russian border.
Right. And that's part of I don't want to say disputed provinces, but let's say the claimed provinces that the Russians have, or Putin more specifically, is claimed as.
That's right. It's close to Donetsk and the Donbass region, and so it's really strategic, and also being a port.
It is a port. It's on the water. Yes.
Yeah, it's on the water. So you can see that it's really strategic for Russia, for Putin. So yeah, that was an interesting experience, and I did some filming of some of the damage that was caused in 2014. There was an attack on a police station, and so sort of filming that's still there. You can still see the sort of pockmarks of the bullets and shelling that went through there, and just sort of talking to locals and getting their views. Lots of Vox Pop interviews, that kind of thing.
Do people identify as, well, they could identify as an ethnic Russian, but not necessarily want to be a part of Russia. So what was your sort of takeaway?
I didn't meet a lot of people that identified as being Russian. I mean, most of the people I was dealing with there were Ukrainian. And yeah, I didn't really get a sense that, they were sort of pro-Russia or anything. I think they still feel very much a part of Ukraine, and that was the situation down there. And I've been really impressed with the Ukrainians that I've interviewed. They're all very sharp and very passionate and love their country. And a lot of them are, very traumatized, as you can imagine. The country's sort of been surrounded for 8 years. They've sort of perpetually had a gun to their head, and yet they just get on with it and go about their daily lives, and it's quite admirable to watch.
And just by way of history, there was an Orange Revolution about 8 or 9 years ago where the popular uprising basically deposed and removed a Russian puppet, a Putin puppet, I guess, in favor of the current guy, Zelensky, who's, I take pride, he's a former comedian. I'm still a comedian, although I'm not getting booked. So I'm wishing for him the best. But, these.
Yeah, you both share that in common. What are you running for president?
I can't even get nominated. I'm happy, honestly, since I last spoke to you, to be still intact physically and okay and still surfing. And I'm taking gratitude for that. And I'm in complete admiration for you out there on the edge of everything. Most Americans don't have a strong geographical sense of the Ukraine. It's just out there. To me, when I look at these stories and this history, geography is so much of their destiny, out there on this steppe, sharing a huge border with Russia and Poland and Belarus and the Black Sea. And, these have been contested regions over the centuries, I guess. But what you're feeling, and this is important, I think, and you can just reiterate, that the people that you talk to and see, they have an identity, a national identity that's clearly Ukrainian. They don't take pride in being an appendage of some Russian empire of generations past. That's what I'm getting.
Absolutely not, And I think Zelensky's been really good in that sense of coming from the ground up as, a people person, a man of the people. You see him and goes out and he talks to people and shakes their hand. And, you don't see Putin doing that necessarily. And so I think that's the big difference. And yeah, it's a democracy. It's a fully fledged country. And yeah, they're just getting on with it under really difficult circumstances. And the majority of people, more than 50% of the people, want to be closer to Europe. More than 50% of the people want to be closer to NATO, involved in NATO. So it's pretty clear, the direction the country wants to go in.
Over the last 24 hours, I was up all night watching the news, daylight for you, nighttime for me, of explosions and bombs and, armored vehicles and now, sadly, casualties. I often wonder, is there a nonviolent solution out there for the Ukrainian people, that would not necessarily precipitate a long, grinding, terrible war? Is there a strategy or anything out there that you're hearing or reading about?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, today there was a report that some of the Russian soldiers had surrendered. And so, that gives you a sense that many of the Russians aren't on board with this war. Ordinary Russian people, they're not on board with it. And they have their own bone to pick with Putin. So, I mean, I guess ultimately that would be the best solution, is that, the Russian troops just back off and defect and walk away from it.
Well, that wouldn't be the first time it happened in Russia. Famously, the Tsarist armies voted with their feet during World War I and just walked back and started a revolution. So it wouldn't be the first time that soldiers voted with their feet, as Lenin said so long ago. And it's also, there's just, to me, seems so many unknowns. Does he have the loyalty of his army? Are they prepared to die in the Ukraine? The general officers, do they want really this? Are they suffering a guy who's been isolated for 2 years and maybe he's just lost his moorings? What will the Russian people do? There's a lot of unknowns out there in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot just hangs on what Putin's going to do. No one really knows. And, he's a maniac. Anything could happen. So we're all just watching and waiting to see.
One of the things I've noticed in Kyiv, I always say Kyiv, now everyone's saying Kyiv, but there seems to be a mass exodus from the city. Where are they going?
Yeah, that's right. Well, they'd be driving, all in vehicles, getting out. The airport's closed today. So they're all sort of getting out via road and heading west towards Poland, Romania. So that's the situation. So there's a lot of chaos on the roads.
What's the weather like? Is it freezing?
It's getting warmer. It was cold when I first arrived, sort of nearly a month ago. There was still a lot of snow on the street and it was really slippery and you skidding and sliding. But yeah, it's got a bit warmer and it's overcast today and a bit of rain. Rain's a good sign because, it melts the snow. But yeah, what a day. I mean, I got out and saw, got onto the streets and you're seeing long queues, people queuing out the front of ATMs and pharmacies, and most things were shut today.
Markets.
All closed. Everything was closed. It's a ghost town. I mean, it's so quiet, too quiet.
And what have you observed in terms of warfare from your own window or building or wherever you've been?
Well, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I had some late night calls last night, and so by the time I hit hit the hay, I was absolutely shattered, and I slept through the sirens and the missile strike. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Anyway, so I haven't had a chance to assess the damage of that missile strike. So apparently, a lot of these strikes have been on military targets in each city where these attacks have happened. They've been, very precise on military positions. And right now, the fatality count is apparently over 40.
Of soldiers or civilians or both? Or
it's soldiers mostly, yeah. So that's the sort of current situation. But it's just rough on the Ukrainians. A lot of people can't leave or won't leave, for the sake of defending their country, and it's just so impressive that most people just run scared, and there's just a lot of people hanging in there in various places in the country.
And they have a standing army, but also an extended sort of citizen militia. I suspect that's going to be part of whatever this response is.
Yeah, that's right. And, they are very highly well equipped. Obviously, as my friend said to me the other day, the Angels, they're a bit outnumbered, but still they have quite an impressive, military, and they're strong and they'll fight.
And you'll be there to see it, I guess.
Well, yeah, I hope not, but it's,
You've been in some other hot spots. You were in Hong Kong, I guess, it's an ongoing drama, but you were there for a big part of that. Are there parallels between Hong Kong, China, Ukraine, Russia?
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, China and Russia are both trying to export their way of life to, countries that, and it's sort of unsolicited, they don't want it. They don't want that way of life. And so there are similarities to say, China and Hong Kong and Russia and Ukraine.
I'm not sure what the Russian ideology is. I mean, there was a time when you could say, well, it was the socialist ideology or communism, but now it feels like it's just a nationalist. I don't know if it's an ideology. It's just like a nationalist, imperialist imperative that's anti-democratic. That's sort of what it feels like at this moment to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, it'd just be a real, shame to understate it. I mean, if Ukraine was to fall, Hong Kong, I guess we had a bit of a warning that would, inevitably happen down the track. It was just that the hands of time, the clock was moved forward on that. But yeah, I mean, obviously that could happen here too.
Now, here's a question I have, and it's unrelated. It's not really unrelated because it could be causative. What's the COVID situation in Ukraine?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the thing is, what I've noticed, I've been in Armenia before this. I've been living in Armenia for 3 months. And, Armenia is a post-war zone or still a war zone. There's still clashes there. So what I'm noticing in these sort of hostile environments is that, COVID is sort of just not front and center at the moment. They've just got too many bigger issues at the moment to deal with. So it's just not really in the conversation as much.
The reason I ask is it could be, COVID is something that could just tear through the Russian army and leave them in very difficult situation.
Oh, true. Absolutely. It seems like more and more, though, we're looking at COVID in the rearview mirror now.
We're starting to feel like it's in the rear view where I am, but I'm not so sure where you are. But you're telling me it is. So it's about 11 o'clock for you. And what's your night and morning and day going to be? Are you just out there grabbing footage and talking to people and collecting and uploading? What is your MO as a journalist right now?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, my 2-week contract ended recently. So I'm just doing sort of extra minutes now and just getting out onto the street, having my camera out and ready and still doing interviews, collecting as much material because you never know when you're just going to have to pack your bags and run. So, yeah, I just want to make sure I've got, plenty of material, lots of interviews and visuals. And
you mentioned some time ago, or you mentioned in an email and a couple of conversations that we had that you got robbed, your equipment was stolen and taken.
Hostile environments, it just goes with the territory.
Mm-hmm.
I just choose the path of least resistance on that.
Let it go.
We're in desperate times. People are desperate, and I made sure I had a backup and everything. So,
and you're using that now, and you just get footage and you can just upload it. There's portals. You just do quick uploads to wherever it goes
or just archive it, and the ABC are just archiving my stuff when I was on that contract, and they just take seconds out of it for their nightly Ukraine news roundup.
The United States is guarantor of whatever is the free world, especially in Europe, and in many ways this becomes a standoff between Putin and Biden. But Australia has specific and unique interests in what's going on too. How are those maybe different, and what are they?
That's a good question. To be honest, I haven't had time to sort of check what the latest is there. I've just been kind of day to day getting through this work. But obviously Australia is very much behind Ukraine and wanting for the most peaceful outcome possible. I've seen speeches with the Prime Minister, and he's completely behind Ukraine. And
Australia's closer to China, and there's Chinese ambitions in Taiwan and the South China Sea, which might
closer geographically, you mean?
Yes. So these regional struggles, what happens in the Ukraine might or might not embolden China in your neck of the woods.
Absolutely. So Taiwan as well. We're completely behind Taiwan, and we don't want to see an invasion of Taiwan. Taiwan is extremely strategic. If China was to take that, they would have more access to the South China Sea, and therefore Australia would be in the firing line. All of those Southeast Asian countries are in the firing line. Yeah, Vietnam. Yeah,
exactly. Historically has had a huge rivalry with China over the centuries. So most Americans are very unaware of history and geography, but the Russian-Ukrainian relationship over the last 100 years, just as a general overview, has been incredibly tortured for the Ukrainians. During the 30s under Stalin, there was a famine-induced genocide that Ukraine suffered during World War II. The Ukrainian people welcomed the Germans until they got a taste of what the Nazis were all about. They strained under Soviet system post-war, and then they had their own a nonviolent, for the most part, orange revolution. What would that be? I don't know. How long ago was that?
2014.
Okay, so 8-9 years ago. So so there's, all this sits on a lot of history. There was a war in the 1840s called the Crimean War. Russia, as a dynastic nation, always wanted a warm water port. These tensions are still out there, when I look at Putin, and I am not in the CIA, I don't have any information, but that anybody else doesn't have, but he strikes me as like a czarist imperialist. His ambitions precede the Soviet time. The last speech, he seems, Big Bad Vlad is completely whack. He's unmoored. I think personally, and I'm talking here just off the top of my head, that he has stumbled into a tar pit of his own making. He stumbled into his demise. Well, he's united Western Europe against him. He's made, he's reinvigorated the European Union and NATO. He's given the American president a kind of political focus that the rest of the country can get behind, which was kind of a fractured country, especially after Trump. This act of aggression probably spells the end for any kind of possibility for Trump to re-enter the political arena in a serious way. My favorite nickname for him was the PVP, Putin's vice president.
I think that's a really good assessment, though, and Putin, I get the feeling, wants to leave a legacy, and part of that legacy might be, taking more real estate from Ukraine and showing that he's Big Bad Vlad, as he goes out.
It's an imperial legacy. There's no bigger crime against humanity than taking on a war of choice. There was no need for a war. When you initiate a war, you're letting loose unknown human catastrophe, that makes him a war criminal right away, in my view. I don't know what'll happen. I think there's so many unknowns out there that it's hard to be predictive. I know one thing, I don't believe Russia is a monolith. There's all kinds of opinions and opportunity for revolt against Putin within Russia. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, it's the $64 million question, how this will play out and hopefully end. And I think sanctions were a good idea. I think, and specifically, I think there needs to be broader sanctions on, some of the Russian elite as well, billionaires who are involved in oil and all this, they need to be stopped in their tracks. And
to me, when I look at Putin, he strikes me as more of a mafia don, and his power basically sits on these oligarchical billionaires that he has controlled and that he's cozied up to, and they've cozied up to him. But as their lives get more miserable and they're less able to export and enjoy whatever their wealth is, Putin's world becomes shakier. I mean, is he popular? Do people like him? I don't get that.
That's the thing. I mean, so many Russians are just so unhappy and, have had him for years and nothing's changing. It's getting more and more oppressive for journalists, for musicians, for artists, poets. It's just, I get the feeling, they're cheering for a revolution there.
And what's tomorrow look like for you?
Well, wait and see. It's sort of minute by minute, hour by hour a bit at the moment. It's sort of, I'm getting advised to leave. So
can you
monitor the situation? Well, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, probably not, but we'll see. I mean, there's an exit strategy in place if required, and it's just, but it's not going to be easy.
Is there commercial airline service available right now?
No, so the airspace shut down today.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically just the road is the only thing, the only way out. I think trains are running to west.
And what's the distance, kilometer-wise, to, let's say, Warsaw from where you're sitting?
I couldn't tell you in Ks, but in driving hours, I think it's about all up probably 8 or 9 hours.
And without traffic?
Well, that's right. Yeah, if there's no traffic. And right now there's...
Do you have food security right now? Like, I see the markets, everything feels shut down. Can you go downstairs and get a meal in a restaurant?
Oh, no, restaurants are all closed. So there were a couple of little mini marts that were open today. And one cafe I found, which was nice, and had a couple of coffees, and it's pretty much a ghost town now. A lot of things are shut. So whether that'll just be for a few days or is this going to be ongoing? It's anyone's guess.
And most of the people who are going to watch and listen to this are people live geographically close to me. They're Americans. What can we do? I mean, my goal is to shed light and truth on a situation is the best I can with my limited little resources here. But what is there that Americans can do you think? Or just people from the West, or Australians for that matter?
I think just to keep an eye on Ukraine and watch this very closely and make sure that leadership is, doing something, whether it's sanctions or providing aid, military aid, all of those things. I mean, that's key to, keeping Ukraine protected and helping Ukrainians to defend their own country. That's all they want to do. They're not asking for much. They're very resilient, tough people. They've been through so much, and I think they just want people to know the truth, know that they are not the aggressors in this situation. I mean, there's a lot of disinformation, a lot of misinformation going around, and from the Russian side, the Kremlin are telling the Russians that, the Ukrainians are provoking Russia and all of this. It's just nonsense. It's just not true. The Ukrainians have just been getting on with their lives. They're just surrounded.
While on the battlefield right now, the Russians are there and seemingly, prevailing. I don't know if they are, but it seems in the battle of truth and the narrative that the Russians are stumbling terribly, that there's no confusion about what's what right now, at least where I sit. It's not about NATO. It's not really about this, Russian minorities trapped in the Ukraine. It's a simple act of territorial and imperialistic aggression to satisfy the lust of one guy.
Yeah, that's right. And and aggression is the right word, not as opposed to sort of crisis. We see in the media, they're talking about it as a sort of crisis. Well, it's not. It's just aggression. It's plain and simple.
Yeah, and I think it's important to just keep calling it what it is. I mean, there's been times in the American story where we are an aggressive nation, whether it was native people here or in Vietnam and other places. It feels like something from the middle of the 20th century, out of the 1940s. It feels like kind of a Hitler-esque move to me. Another dimension to this struggle has been the cyber war. I'm thrilled that you and I are having this talk, and it seems to be unobstructed, and I'm capturing it. Has there been any kind of disruption on that level that you've observed?
Well, remarkably, over the last day or so, comms didn't go out. So we've got internet, phones are working, there's service. There were some disruptions leading up to this, though. I was noticing just sort of, maps not working properly, or, funny sort of stuff happening in terms of just the internet. So, I mean, cyber attacks have been a constant thing for Ukraine. They've had to cope with that for months now. And they attacked the Ukrainian government. And cyber attacks is a really big challenge here, big problem.
As it was in the United States, for the benefit of Trump. Not a total coincidence that so much of our political drama in America over the last few years has been about manipulation in the Ukraine by our own American president, or old American. Putin's vice president, Trump, the billionaire brat boy, was himself trying to manipulate the Ukrainian president for his own political benefit, with the threat of, if you don't do for me, then I'm not going to give you what you need to protect you from big bad Vlad. So it's just been going on.
Oh yeah, sure. It's been building. Yeah, just had to keep going and under extraordinarily difficult circumstances. And the information war, the cyber attacks, all of this, all the aggression, it's tough. It's a lot of psychological warfare going on.
I feel how tired you are,
Yeah. I apologize for that. It's been a hell of a trip, as you can imagine. Yeah, and it's tough. Like, this assignment for me was different to what I normally do. Usually I'm writing a lot of text, and so I was behind a camera this time for the bulk of the work, and that's tough because you sort of don't get to see people's emotions or feelings, and it's only later when you review the footage that you see sort of how traumatized people are. So many of my interviewees were crying in interviews, and I felt terrible because I just didn't see it at the time, and I'm still asking questions. And,
from behind the lens, you're looking at it.
Yeah, from behind the lens, and you sort of, it only hits you later, and you just feel terrible. And look, it's been rough. It's I can't deny this hasn't been an easy assignment, and I'm pretty worn down. But I'm hoping to get a second wind, and hoping to sort of come back permanently, or stay permanently. Who knows?
Now, I know you're a surfer, and the surf sucks, as from what I can see. I look at the reports. It's not good in the Ukraine ever. But has the country in some way made a claim on your spirit and soul? Like, I want to be here longer, or I want to see this through, or alternatively, I just want to get out and get back to where I feel more at home.
I don't want to leave. I'd love to be able to continue. It's just if I get orders to go, which I've already had, and I think I probably will get squeezed out one way or another. But hopefully that'll be temporary, and I'll come back. I mean, it leaves a mark on you. It's an impressive city. Kiev's impressive. I mean, the architecture's stunning. It could be like Prague, or maybe the older neighborhoods of Paris. It's just, it's breathtaking, the architecture, and the culture, and it's old, and so it's no surprise that Putin wants to bring it back into the sphere of influence. it was the form of modern Russia. This is where a lot of modern Russia came from, and spirituality, faith, religion, language, so many things started here in Ukraine that are now Russia. So
a lot of the cultural life of the Ukraine and Kyiv has been expropriated or imported into the larger Russian kind of idea of itself.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah. And it's interesting, more than a lot of Ukrainians speak Russian, most speak Russian and Ukrainian, and there's an obvious connection there. There's no disputing that they are, historically bound together and tied in many nuanced ways. It's just that, their political desires have gone in, completely opposite directions, and that's what separates the two.
We have so many Ukrainian people right here in Los Angeles. It's just a huge. There's a mail order bride industry of you guys I know that married Ukrainian women here. You get the feeling that they're looking to whatever freedom that the West offers. I'm not so sure how free we are, but it's just, the gravitational pull is definitely what I'm getting from you, and what I'm reading is it's looking westward. I always feel like the Russian story has always been conflicted. After all, the Russian nobility generally didn't even speak Russian. They spoke French. They vacationed in Paris. With the rise of the Soviets, many left for France. So there's this kind of love-hate, jealousy thing in the Muscovite psyche, towards the West, as far as I can see. Sometimes there's some anger and jealousy wrapped up in that. It goes back, I guess, even to the Napoleonic times. After all, Napoleon, was marched right to the edge of Moscow.
Yeah, through Ukraine. Yeah, this region's been through a lot of invasions.
Well, we should stay in touch. You are my link and my correspondent. And if anybody in the Ukraine wants to know what's going on in the Hollywood Hills, I'm happy to return the favor.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah. I love that you've got that really good geopolitical eye. You know when a disaster is happening in the world, you don't shy away from it. And I really commend you on that. You've really got a good worldview, and
well, thanks.
It's impressive.
Just feel like the only tools I have are, one, my wit, and then also like, let's shine light, even if mine is a little pinprick. It's not the light of CNN or MSNBC or the ABC in Australia, but it's a light nonetheless. And your view matters. Now, have you been able to learn or absorb the language at all?
Oh, it was just go and pick up what you can. And look, I don't want to pretend that I'm any kind of expert in this region. I'm very new to the region, and my mission here was purely just to get vision and learn as much as possible. And I'm just learning. And, I'm not in a position to sort of editorialize the deeper, nuanced issues here. It was really just about going in, getting vision, getting that out.
Well, there's a couple views, you get in the drone and you fly up and you look over, and then there's the view of history, but there's also an equally important view, and this is your view that you're offering as a view in real time, on the ground, face to face, in the cities, seeing with your own eyes, feeling the identification that the people feel. There is a truth there, and you've communicated that to me, and hopefully
I hope so. Yeah.
Well, stay safe, man, and put on a friggin' flak jacket if you need one, and let's stay in touch, and we can kind of obviously I want to stay in touch because I consider you a friend I haven't met. I look forward to the day when we can go to your brother's place in Vanuatu, and scuba dive and surf some reef passes there and stuff like that. When you leave, where will you go? Back to Australia? Back to Vietnam? Where do you feel is home?
Yeah, good question. I've got an apartment to get back to in Armenia at some point. I've got stuff there, and I need to kind of assess that. And yeah, Armenia was my base before this. So, and it's just whether I stay on there or do I find myself in a full-time capacity here, depending on how things shape up. So yeah, it's all a bit unknown. It's all up in the air. And there's other jobs that are sort of planned later in the year, in other countries. But yeah, I'm just sort of taking it day by day. I'll need a bit of a rest from this work that I've been doing, and I'm looking forward to just writing now, getting back to writing because, I was just sort of stuck behind a camera.
Maybe sometimes it takes time to process this. When you film it, it's immediate, but when you need to process it through your literary kind of lens, you maybe need some time for that. So.
Yeah, that's right. It does. You need to be in the right mindset and frame of mind, but, there'll be cracking stories to write, and hopefully that of value and shine some light on this situation.
Well, I think the core thing for people like me or people that in my community is to understand, one, that the Ukraine is its own country with its own borders and its own history, and it is not part of Russia. I mean, its own boundaries and borders have been contested over the centuries by czars and Poles and Austro-Hungarians and Germans, but essentially it has its own history and its own national identity. And if there's going to be any preservation of whatever this world order is, that has to be honored. And if it's not, who the fuck knows what can happen?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it needs to be preserved, and all these sort of cultures that are being sort of bullied deserve our full and utter attention and support. And in the same way we were talking about Hong Kong and Taiwan and now Ukraine. And
the big challenge for me, having worked on this myself in my own screenplays, is what would Gandhi do? What is the creative nonviolent approach to resistance here that exposes all of these weaknesses of Putin's and the Russians that, could end this without just a catastrophe, a human catastrophe, of outsized proportions. And I don't know, but the first step is the truth. So you've definitely shed some light on it.
Yeah, I hope so. And, you're right in that, what is going to be the most ideal outcome for all this, and I guess, some sort of destabilization within the military or the higher ups in the Kremlin, and to see some sort of internal collapse within that, and for Putin to lose his reach of power, and that would ultimately benefit everyone.
Yeah, I mean, this is not an expression of Putin's strength. It's more an expression of his weakness. After all, if Russian life was so appealing, the Ukrainians would hey, let's go up to the amusement park in Moscow for the weekend instead of let's going to New York for the weekend. You know what I mean? It's like you kind of make the case, the societies make the case for where they want to be. And if you got to roll tanks in, your case is failing. There is a competition for what is the best lifestyle, or where's the most opportunity for freedom and self-realization and expression. And right now, it could change over time in history, but right now it's not towards Putin's Russia. It's elsewhere.
Yeah, that's right. There's so much other sort of soft power that people are more willing to accept and identify with and relate to. I think that's Putin's weakness, and I think he's backed himself into a corner and set himself up for a fall. We'll see.
Now, is there any place where people can find any of your writings or other work as I kind of wrap this thing up with you? Like, I've read some of the work that you did about Hong Kong, a year or two ago. Is there a place where people can find you or read your observations?
I have a website, just my name, where I post a few clippings. But so I mean, at the moment, I've just been behind a camera, so it's all sort of visual work, and it just goes into the ether of the ABC. So and that's, as a cameraman, you're not sort of credited. It's just out there and for them to use how they wish. But I still freelance when I'm not, this was exclusive. I had to just work exclusively for the ABC. So, but normally, I'll be freelance and I'll have a variety of clients, The Diplomat in Washington, Nikkei Asia Review in Japan, for sort of multimedia text, pictures, that sort of thing, and text. So variety of publications that I still keep up with and write for.
So you just Google you and they can find you at various places in terms of your writings and observations. And Hugh, it's great to see you, to meet you on another level. I'm still looking forward to the day when we can do it in person, someplace fun and exotic, maybe in LA or Malibu or in Vanuatu or Australia or Vietnam, wherever. I'm looking forward to that day. But in the meantime, let's stay in touch, and we can do, if you want and you're able, a follow-up. This is an unfolding story. There's so much uncertainty in so many directions. Putin could be deposed, and the Russians could put their tanks in reverse and be out of there in a week. I mean, anything's possible. We don't know. But the impact of these days will be felt for a long time, for sure. So I want to thank you again for joining me on A Rebel Without Applause and for the privilege of this conversation.
Oh, thank you, Bill. It's always a pleasure, mate. And let's keep in touch.
Yeah, well, I'll be in touch with you, and I'll send you links to this. You can share this conversation as you wish.
All right, you take care. Great to talk to you.
All right, brother, you take care. Thanks so much. And I'm going to just sign off while I have you here, folks. Thank you for joining me on this little episode number 2, season 5 of A Rebel Without Applause, with Hugh Bohane from Kyiv in the Ukraine, reporting on what is a momentous event in our collective history. Till next time, namaste, shalom, and aloha. By that I mean, namaste aloha. See ya.